Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:06 in your nation's capital. Glad you're starting your day right with O'Connor and Company. Coming up, we'll talk to General Jack Keane on what's next for Ukraine. And at 8:35, Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy on that big show in the Oval Office. I'm Julie Gunlock, sitting in for Larry O'Connor, who's back tomorrow. And I'm sitting alongside my friend Joe Concha, Fox News contributor and author of the upcoming book, The Greatest Comeback Ever Inside Trump's Big, Beautiful Campaign. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning. Yeah, you can pre-order the book now, and trust me, it wrote itself. It's funny. It's disturbing. There's so much went on during this campaign that it feels like it was like 5 years ago. It was only 5 months ago.
Joe, you make me laugh all morning, but also I'm getting texts from friends saying they're laughing so hard listening to Joe. So definitely you're going to...
But I'm willing to, keep an open mind. We got a European model here in the Concha household.
Well, joining us now is Joe diGenova. Another Joe. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
How are you, buddy?
So, Joe,
great.
Joe, I got to ask you, we have a lot to get to, but I have to ask your opinion of what happened in the Oval Office, the big sort of blow up with Zelensky. What were your thoughts? I think most of us were sort of, our mouths were agape watching this go down. Some of us, I thought Trump and Vance were masterful, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that show that went down.
Well, the Democrats said that Zelensky was ambushed. Actually, Trump and Vance were ambushed. And the reason they were ambushed was before he came to the White House, Zelensky met with a group of Democratic lawmakers, including the senator from Maryland. And so what happened was they told him, the Democratic representatives, senators and House representatives, told Zelensky not to agree to the mineral deal unless he got assurances. They're the ones that put him up to this. They gave him false sense of security. So he went in there, and instead of doing what he should have done, which was listen and shut up, he did what he did as a performer, a former television star. He got in there, and he tried to take over the stage, and he did it, and he blew it for the people of Ukraine. I have a lot of friends who support Ukraine and love Zelensky no matter what, but the bottom line is this. Zelensky didn't do Ukraine any good in that meeting. That was a disgrace. Trump and Vance did exactly what they should have done, which was not take any crap from this tin pot little dictator.
And that's the thing, right, Joe, that here he had this great deal, right, this raw minerals deal that could be worth hundreds of billions of dollars for each country. That's the security guarantee, right? Because then you have corporate boots on the ground, U.S. economic interest there. And to your point, he met with Democrats instead, just like as J.D. Vance, the vice president, pointed out, he campaigned with Democrats a few weeks before a U.S. presidential election in the key swing state of Pennsylvania. Now we're seeing a report this morning where Zelensky is saying that he's willing to meet with Trump again, but only if the talks are serious. Yeah, dude, Trump is as serious as a prison fight, so I don't think you have to worry about that part. But again, it's this attitude, like a child that was always given everything they wanted when they asked for it, where he thinks he has the full house when he doesn't even have a pair of threes, Joe.
Well, he's been encouraged by the Democrats in the House and the Senate. It's disgraceful foreign policy behavior by the Democrats. It's traitor. It borders on being traitorous. They're interested in a political advantage, not what's in the best interest of the people of Ukraine or the United States. I'm sure that Chris Van Hollen and all those other little munchkins on the Democratic side would just love to see Americans dying on the ground in Ukraine against Russian troops. What a disgraceful performance. This is not your mother's Democratic Party.
No.
These guys talk about guys who are friendly with Putin. The Democrats are the ones who hustled up to the Russians.
But isn't it,
when they thought up the Russian collusion hoax, these idiots. What a disgraceful, traitorous, subversive bunch. And Chris Van Hollen from Maryland is at the top of the list of subversives.
Yeah. Joe, I'm so glad to hear you talk about this because, I couldn't believe it's almost incomprehensible to think about a group of American politicians coaching a foreign leader on how to negotiate against the president of the United States and really against the best interest of his own country. You said it. It's verging on traitorous, the idea, but don't you think, Joe, that this is all kind of about the extension of the Russian collusion hoax? That they could accuse Trump then of being pro-Putin, being against Zelensky. It's all part of this effort.
And that is exactly why there has to be a federal grand jury investigation of how the Russian hoax got started.
Yep.
It got started on January 5th, 2017 in the Oval Office when Barack Obama, Joe Biden, John Brennan, Clapper, James Comey, and Susan Rice, watching her lecture us over the weekend made me absolutely sick. Ugh. They got in that office and they decided they were going to start a counterintelligence investigation of an incoming president of the United States. And it went on for 8 years. This will never end until these people pay a price, and that means prison time.
Wow. And you're right about Susan Rice. I mean, we saw some tweets over the weekend where she sounds a little defensive now, doesn't she? All right. The same gal who once said that Bo Bergdahl conducted himself with honor and distinction when he left his unit only to be captured by the Taliban. Then we had to give back like 5 Taliban, high-level people just to get him back. I'd rather have, Jerry Rice, Ray Rice, Donna Rice than this Rice lecturing anybody on anything at this point. But that's where we're at, Joe. And I think the incoming deputy FBI director, a guy by the name of Dan Bongino, who's a friend of ours, he says he's going to investigate this now as far as what truly happened as far as Russia collusion, because that impacted U.S. foreign policy. And this is something that Bongino said in his broadcast last week that he is going to pursue. So do you think this actually comes to fruition?
It better. It has to. And by the way, look at the FBI over the last week and a half. The Epstein thing. Where are the documents that the Attorney General of the United States did not get? The Attorney General was embarrassed by the FBI, by the failure of the Bureau to produce thousands of records. Why didn't the Southern District of New York FBI produce those records? Second issue, the honeypot scandal. FBI. Kash Patel comes out and defends the female FBI agent who was involved in that operation, but he does not even address the plot itself, the honeypot plot that Comey created to go against the Trump campaign. There is a big problem in the FBI. Yeah. The question is whether or not Patel and Dan Bongino are enough to fix it. They need troops. They need people. I know for a fact that there are people waiting in line to go on board at the FBI, and they cannot get through White House personnel. They have a problem. They have the same problem they had in the first administration. White House personnel is holding up appointments to all of these agencies, and they are screwing up the president's second term.
Joe, can you stay on for another segment?
Yeah.
Yes.
We got to get 2 out of this guy. He's that good.
Exactly. Okay, great. So we'll continue this conversation in just a moment.
WMAL, making sense of the news.
Yeah. So, Joe, let's talk about these Epstein files. Kind of a mess. You had a bunch of so-called influencers going in, getting these binders, and frankly, coming out of the White House and dancing and sort of, posing for the cameras. I thought it looked bad. It did not look serious. I mean, we're talking about a file that is ostensibly, filled with stories of suffering and human trafficking. So I was really disappointed in some of the reactions coming out of the White House, again, dancing and smiling for the cameras. But then it turns out that there's really nothing in there. And you touched on this. Pam Bondi is asking for this information. And I guess, was it the New York office that just didn't give everything to her? What's up with that New York office?
Well, it's the same problem you have with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. They are independent. As you recall, they had a resignation recently over the attempted dismissal of the case against Mayor Adams in New York. Several people in that office resigned. I don't really care how many of them resign. The more the merrier, actually, for the Southern District. Yeah, that place is a cesspool of anti-Republican behavior. They hate conservatives. They hate Trump. They'll do anything they can to screw the president of the United States. And until Pam Bondi takes control of the Southern District, both the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI's office up there, they are going to continue to be undercut by them. Those people up there hate Trump. And unless these people in the Justice Department figure that out and do something about it, they will continue to be undermined by the Southern District of New York.
Joe, I'll ask almost a rhetorical question. Epstein was murdered, right? I mean, no suicide. The cameras just happened to go off at that exact moment. I mean, he was murdered. I'll say it on the record. I think he was murdered. What do you think?
I actually don't know. All I know is that if you expect incompetence from the federal government, you will get it. What happened at that federal detention facility in New York was inexcusable. It created the legitimate belief that he could have been murdered. Whether or not he committed suicide, I don't think we'll ever know the real answer to your question, Joe. And the reason is the corruptness of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the incompetence. What DOJ is doing is essential. I hear all these people complaining about the hard feelings for employees. You know what? Too bad. We've got a problem, a big problem. And the only way to fix it is to break China. You got to break a lot of China to solve this problem when you have $36 trillion national debt. What happened to Epstein is an example of the incompetence of the federal government. You can't protect a guy like Epstein in a federal detention facility. It raises issues which lead to your conclusion, Joe. I don't know if that's true, but it's a reasonable conclusion based on all of the available evidence. It looks like a conspiracy to kill the guy. Even if it wasn't, it looks that bad. And, you know, I always have a saying, if it looks bad, if it looks like a conspiracy, if it has all the facts supporting it, it probably is.
Joe, I want to ask you a little bit about the sort of this messy release of files. There was some information in those binders, but can you tell us about the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell, who was sort of the madame of Epstein, she has, her case is in litigation. I think there's a case before the Supreme Court related to it. Isn't that why there's some limits on what can be released?
Yes, some of the information is involved in her case, and so that theoretically can't be released. But if that's the case, why wasn't that communicated to the Attorney General?
Right.
Why wasn't she told that? Why wasn't a process set up where she could explain that in her statement, that things that were still under litigation? And by the way, let me just say this for the record. I don't believe that any of those records in the Epstein case have to be protected for her litigation. They can release every document in that case. There's no need, nothing in there except protecting the names and identities of the victims. That's all properly protected under privacy. I have no problem with that. But everything else in that case in New York against her should be public. Every single piece of evidence. There is no reason in the world to use ongoing federal criminal litigation as a reason to refuse to release documents. That is a fake answer from the Southern District, both the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI. But here's the problem. They didn't say that to the Attorney General.
Right.
Why didn't they say that to the Attorney General? And the reason is they think they're in control in New York. They think they can do anything they want. And unless Pam Bondi takes control of the Southern District of New York. By the way, where's the new U.S. Attorney for New York? Has he been confirmed by the Senate? No. Do you think you can take control of the Southern District without a confirmed Trump U.S. Attorney? Answer, no. These people better get their act together. White House personnel better get off its ass, and they better start confirming people. They're going to lose the advantage.
And they're losing the war of public opinion, Joe, certainly, because everybody wants these things released, right? I mean, it's just been too long, and who is being protected here exactly? I mean, this has to be even bigger than I think we imagine at this point. Pam Bondi herself said what she has seen so far is sickening. I'd like to know what that is, but, again, to your point, we got to get confirmations. And the fact that this cover-up has gone on as long as it has. ABC News had this story. Amy Robach, they have her on tape saying, we had the story and they wouldn't let us run it. My God, who is this impacting at this point? I think, when I get to heaven, that's going to be the second question I asked after who killed JFK, and then that's my second question. I want the Epstein files. Throw it out to me.
Well, actually, here's my position. I really don't care about the Epstein case, except here's what I care about. I care about what happened in Florida. Now, this is the part that people forget. The first Epstein case, criminal case, was in Florida. It was during the Trump first term. The U.S. attorney there was Alex Acosta. He later became the Secretary of Labor, but he was the U.S. attorney who dropped the federal case against Epstein, and then there was this phony local deal with him, and he got barely no time in prison. He was weekends in prison. That's where that case could have been unraveled. And what happened? He hired a bunch of very influential lawyers from Washington, D.C. Ken Starr was one of his lawyers. God rest his soul. Great guy. Did a good job. I'm not criticizing Ken. He did what all lawyers are supposed to do. They represent their clients. Who I criticize is Alex Acosta, the U.S. attorney. Why in the world would you drop a case like this? And the answer is Alex Acosta was starstruck. He didn't know how to handle the Epstein case, and he got railroaded into dumping the case. And he got rewarded. He got to be the Secretary of Labor. Isn't that great? Now, that's the part of the Epstein story that really nobody ever talks about. Epstein could have been stopped back then. And what happens? He gets out with a slap on the wrist and continues raping little girls for another few years because of the morons in Florida.
Joe, thank you so much for this and Ukraine. My goodness, just a wealth of information. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Joe.
Anytime.
We've got much more to come. Right now, it is 7:24 on WMAL.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:36. We are plowing through this third day of March. Thanks for listening to O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 8:05, General Jack Keane on what's next for Ukraine. At 8:35, Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy. He'll talk about the big Zelensky-Trump Oval Office blow-up. I'm Julie Gunlock, sitting in for Larry O'Connor, who will be back tomorrow alongside my friend Joe Concha, Fox News contributor and author of the upcoming book, The Greatest Comeback Ever, Inside Trump's Big, Beautiful Campaign. Good morning, Joe.
Unburdened by what has been. Whatever happened to Kamala Harris, by the way? I don't.
Did she show up at the Academy Awards?
You know, if I watched, I would tell you.
Yeah.
I've seen some clips of Conan O'Brien saying, finally, someone's standing up to a powerful Russian, so he had to get political. But, if she was there, if a tree falls in the forest, no one hears it.
All I saw was her. There was a picture of her saying Academy Award snacks, and she was putting Doritos into a bowl. That was the only sighting I saw of her. But there was a rumor. She was going to show up at the Academy Awards. I guess not.
Would have got a standing ovation, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. So, Joe,
she worked at McDonald's once. I don't know if you heard.
Still no evidence.
No, none.
Yeah,
she wrote 2 memoirs. You realize
That's
this?
right.
I know I'm going off on a tangent. She wrote
that's
2
okay.
memoirs, 2 stories about her life in books, and never mentioned that until like August of this year. That whole McDonald's
that's
thing.
the kind of working class story that politicians love, right? They worked at McDonald's. They had all these hourly jobs, and she doesn't mention it. Seems kind of fishy.
Yeah, and she ran for president before, and she never mentioned it.
Right.
She didn't work at McDonald's. I'll go on the record. Fine. Bring the lawsuit.
Yeah.
Show me some proof. Even McDonald's says we have no record of this.
We want discovery.
Exactly.
That'd be great. Yes. Okay, so Joe, let's go back and talk a little bit about the Trump-Zelensky meeting. I should say Trump, Zelensky, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio meeting, because all of them were worth watching. And speaking of watching, sadly, a lot of people only watched, the last 7 minutes where the yelling was going back and forth. And, of course, the left and the corporate media is casting this as, Trump was bullying Zelensky. It was the absolute opposite of that. If you watch the whole, I think you said 46 minutes.
46 minutes, yeah.
Tell us what people should know about that meeting.
Well, for starters, I got to see all weekend on these stupid Sunday shows where, President Trump, what does Putin have on him? Why is he on the side of Russia?
Right,
No,
right.
He's trying to broker a peace that would save Ukraine and end this stalemate that otherwise would have lasted in perpetuity if Kamala Harris and whoever is running the presidency and the Oval Office, if she won, then we'd still see billions going out the door with zero accountability, right?
Yes.
And for those who need to be reminded of this once again, let's see. Putin invaded under George W. Bush, another country. Invaded under Barack Obama, another country. Didn't with Donald Trump for whatever reason during his first term. We know the reason. And then invaded under Joe Biden. So, look, when you watch that full 46-minute video, for the first 36 minutes, Trump is cordial, everything is fine, and then Zelensky starts demanding these security guarantees, and that wasn't what the meeting was about.
Joe, those security guarantees, he meant boots on the ground, American soldiers in place in the Ukraine on the Russian border. That's what he wants, which that is a provocation that and Trump was very clear. You are playing with World War III. You are going to cost millions of lives. You are and you know, there's no sense from Zelensky of enough lives have been, hundreds of thousands, including women and children, have been killed in this war. And the idea that he would want to further cause provocation, it's just amazing to me. But I will tell you, Joe, I think, look, what Americans saw in the Oval Office, this was not an American president bullying a weak ally. This was not sort of Trump, you know, just yelling at Zelensky. This was, and I think this really resonated with Americans. I think Americans saw a president who was sort of standing up for the American taxpayer, who has given billions, hundreds of $350 billion to Ukraine. And there seems to be no thank you. There seems to be no, we know Americans have sacrificed. We're suffering in America. And there's no sense of, boy, you know, you've really been our allies. You've really been our supporters. It was this closed arms. You know, when you get your teenager in trouble and they've got their closed arms and they're kind of averting, eye contact. Yeah. That's what we got. And more demands.
Yeah, and you look at a Harvard-Harris poll that just came out. 72% of American voters want Ukraine to negotiate a settlement to end this war. That's nearly three-quarters of the country says, enough. All right, we've given too much money. Too many lives have been lost. This will be a stalemate 5 years, 10 years from now. But Zelensky seems to want that for whatever reason. Oh, maybe it's because the blank checks have been coming in this entire time. And our media thinks there's this groundswell of support for Zelensky in this war. It ain't 2022 anymore, all right? Yeah. And people are tired of this. And the fact that, again, he walks in there like he looks like he's about to go clubbing in Budapest instead of just wearing something halfway decent to the Oval Office. I mean, this guy was an actor, and you could see this is all cheesy performance art in a way to enrich himself. And I'm sorry, everybody's tired of this.
No, I agree. I like that you brought up the polling. Can we play cut 13, because this polling information is really interesting? Yeah, Michael.
Went up to the press area to get an understanding of what we're watching. This is what I was told. The president has kicked Zelensky out of the White House. His delegation right now is telling him that he's got to go home.
No, this is not. This is the wrong.
That's Jackie.
It's okay. That's Jackie Heinrich saying that.
Holy Toledo. Look at this trend line here. U.S. support for Ukraine is too much. Back when the war began, back in February of 2022, it was just 7%. Up like a rocket ship. My goodness. Up now in February of 2025 to 41%. And the clear majority of Republicans, and of course Republicans are in charge of the U.S. government now, 62% of Republicans say that the U.S. support for Ukraine is too much. What a difference from just 3 years ago. I can remember, John, all those backyards in the United States with those Ukrainian flags. Far fewer of them today, as Americans' opinions on Ukraine have changed dramatically. What about?
Yeah, so, I mean, again, you nailed it. The American public are getting real tired of this.
Yeah, and that was, Harry Enton, right? Yeah, over on CNN saying this. Yes, 74% want a compromise and quick end to the war. Just 34% trust Zelensky to do the right thing. 62% say the U.S. is giving too much support to Ukraine. So Trump is in line with a vast majority of Americans, while the media continues to portray Zelensky as the next coming of Winston Churchill.
Oh, God, don't get me started on that.
Exactly. Yeah. Churchill was a day drinker, and he accomplished all he did. You got to admire that on some level.
Oh, I do. Yeah. I do. Joe, more day drinking coming up, but it is 7:44 on WMAL.
Miss anything? Don't worry, we've got you covered. Get today's breaking news on the Vince Colonnese Show, weekdays 3 to 6, right here on WMAL.
You know, Joe, there were lots of people in that meeting in the Oval Office with Zelensky and Trump and J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, but also Secretary Bessent. He described what he experienced behind the scenes of Zelensky trying to bully him in an earlier meeting. Let's play cut 17.
Laura, I went all the way to Kyiv because I thought it was important. President Trump sent me there to, again, we were supposed to bring the Ukrainian people closer to the U.S. people, send a strong signal to Russian leadership that we they had not only shared values, but now shared economic interest, and also have a strong signal for the American people that their tax dollars were actually going to work. Instead, President Zelensky and I had a very tough 45-minute meeting at a very loud decibel level, and I kept telling him, Mr. President, the purpose of this is to show the Russians there is no daylight between us. And at the end of the meeting, he said, well, I'm not signing this. And I said, at the end of the meeting, I said to him, what do you want to go out and tell the press? I said, because I don't want to go out and show the Russians that there's daylight in between us. And he said, well, I'm going to go out and say I'll sign it in Munich. Then he got to Munich, and he ran into Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio, very different than Vice President Harris and Secretary Blinken. But he didn't sign the agreement. So finally, we were supposed to have the signing today. It was supposed to be a great day, and this is one of the biggest own goals in diplomatic history.
Well, what a brat. That's pretty amazing.
That's the perfect word. Yeah, and you can't trust him. Clearly, right? It's us, I'm going to go out and I'm going to sign it. Okay. Then he gets to Munich, and he gets in front of the media, which adores him, and then he says, oh, no, acts like a tough guy and says he isn't going to sign it. Then he goes into the president's dojo, right? The Oval Office, and that president is Trump, and tries to negotiate in front of the American media. That was just 31 flavors of stupid. And now we got to read this morning that he's saying, I'll meet with Trump again, but only if the talks are serious. Yeah. Well, yeah, Trump's as serious as, a heart attack. So I'm pretty sure you're fine on that front, Julie. And that's the thing here.
And also, when you think about the level of respect that we have shown, he meets in the Oval Office, in the hallowed ground of the Oval Office with Trump and Marco Rubio and Vice President Vance. I mean, how many more high-level people do you want in that office for him to sign this deal? That is an incredible show of support and respect for him, and then he treats them the way he treated. And then it turns out he's been doing it all along with Bessent, with Marco Rubio, with J.D. Vance. He has been such a brat.
And with Joe Biden. You'll read that Biden lost his temper in 2022 when he demanded more money and more weapons. Like, he's been doing this for years, and he had a president who, outside of Biden, I guess, losing his temper a little bit a couple of years ago, and a president, obviously, whose brain turned to applesauce, who just said yes, and who do I make this blank check out to? He's used to that. He's not getting it anymore. Sorry, go to your room, think about what you did, and come back down when you realize that this is the best deal you're ever going to get, and it's not on your terms, pal. Sorry.
That's a perfect way to put it. It is 7:52.
That's right.